The lights in the great meeting hall flickered as another emergency report came through. Admiral Jake Morrison sat in his chair and watched the alien faces around the huge table. Each one looked worried. Some were scared. The Galactic Council had never seen anything like this before. The Void Reapers hit 3 more colonies this week, said Ambassador Krill from the Zephyrian Empire. His blue skin had turned pale. They destroyed everything. The hospitals, the schools, even the food centers. Nothing was left. Morrison leaned forward. He had been part of the human delegation for 2 years now. In that time, he had seen many problems. Pirates, trade wars, border fights. But this was different. The Void Reapers were not just stealing. They were destroying everything that held the galaxy together. Not Captain Lisa Harper, who sat next to Morrison, looked at her datapad. She was his best advisor, smart and tough. She had fought in 3 wars before joining the diplomatic service. Sir, the pattern is clear. They are not random attacks. They hit the communication stations first, then the trade routes. After that, they destroy the colonies. What do our forces say? Asked Elder Zix-9. The old alien looked tired. He had been on the council for over 100 years. Morrison had never seen him look this worried before. General Voss from the Thermal Union spoke up. His voice was deep and rough. Our fleets are too slow. By the time we get there, they are gone. We tried to catch them at Sector 7. They vanished before we could fire a shot. The crystalline hegemony has the same problem, added Ambassador. Shard. Her crystal body rang like a bell when she spoke. Our computers can predict their moves, but they do not follow any logical pattern. It makes no sense. Morrison knew about the different military forces in the galaxy. The crystalline hegemony used pure logic in their battles. Every move was calculated. Every action had a reason. The Thermal Union used brute force. Big ships, heavy weapons, overwhelming power. The Ethereal Collective used mind powers to fight. Their enemies, not all of them, had failed against the Void Reapers. There must be something we can do, said Harper quietly. She looked at the reports again. What about the old records? Did anyone ever face something like this before? Elder Zix-9 was quiet for a long moment. The other council members looked at him. Finally, he spoke. There were the Stellar Knights. Long ago, but that was a different time. Morrison had never heard of Stellar Knights. What were they? Protectors, said Zix-9. His old voice became softer. They kept the peace in the galaxy over 3,000 years ago, before we had great fleets, before we had smart computers, before we learned that individual heroes were not needed anymore. The room became quiet. Morrison could hear the air. Systems working. The lights hummed above them. Outside the great windows, he could see the dead world of Valtara spinning slowly below the station. What happened to them? Morrison asked. The Great Schism, replied Zix-9. Technology advanced. We built better weapons, faster ships, smarter computers. We realized that we did not need knights anymore. Honor, courage, sacrifice. These things became old ideas. The galaxy moved beyond them. Ambassador Krill made a sound like a laugh, but it was not happy. Honor will not stop a plasma cannon. Courage cannot shield a city from orbital bombardment. Morrison felt something stir inside him. He thought about Earth, about the stories his grandfather told him, stories about knights in old armor, about people who stood up to bullies even when they could not win, about soldiers who jumped on grenades to save their friends. Maybe that is the problem, Morrison said slowly. Everyone looked at him. Maybe we need those old ideas again. General Voss snorted. Human, your species is new here. You do not understand. We tried individual heroics. It does not work on a galactic scale. Does anything else work? Morrison asked. Your fleets cannot catch them. Your computers cannot predict them. Your mind powers cannot stop them. Maybe we need to try something different." Harper was looking at him with interest. She knew that look in his eyes. She had seen it before battles. "What are you thinking, sir?" Morrison stood up. The alien delegates watched him. "On Earth, we still tell stories about knights. About people who protected others, even when it was dangerous. Even when they could not win. We never stopped believing in those ideas." "Because your species is primitive," said Ambassador Shard. Her crystal voice was cold. "Maybe," Morrison said. "Or maybe we remember something important that everyone else forgot." Elder Zix-9 studied Morrison with his old eyes. "You think humans could succeed where we have failed? I think the Void Reapers expect us to act like everyone else. Run away when we are outnumbered. Put our own safety first. Use logic and technology to solve every problem." Morrison looked around the table. What if we did not do what they expect? The room was quiet again. Finally, Zix-9 spoke. "The old records about the Stellar Knights are kept in the deep archives. Most of it is considered mythology now. Fairy tales." "I would like to see those records," Morrison said. "Why?" Asked General Voss. "What can old stories teach us about modern warfare?" Morrison thought about his answer. He thought about the reports Harper had shown him. Colonies burning. Families running for their lives. People dying because no one could protect them. "Maybe they can teach us how to be heroes again," he said after. The meeting, Morrison and Harper walked through the quiet corridors of Nexus Prime. The station was huge, built by a dozen different species. Each section looked different. The thermal union areas were all metal and fire. The crystalline parts were made of living glass. The ethereal sections seemed to float in the air. "Do you really think this will work?" Harper asked as they walked. Morrison stopped at a window that looked out at Valtara. The planet below was brown and gray. Nothing lived there anymore. The Void Reapers had hit it 6 months ago. They had not just destroyed the cities. They had poisoned the air and water. Nothing would grow there for 1,000 years. "I do not." "No," Morrison said honestly. "But I know that doing nothing will not work. And I know that everything else has failed." Harper nodded. She understood. She had been a soldier before she became a diplomat. She knew that sometimes you had to try the impossible. "The other species think we are too young," she said, "too primitive. They think our ideas about honor and duty are silly." Morrison smiled. But it was not a happy smile. Maybe they are right. Maybe we are primitive. But maybe being primitive means we still remember how to fight for what is right instead of what is smart. They reached Morrison's quarters. Harper paused at the door. "If we do this, if we really try to bring back the Knights, it will change everything. Not just for humans, for the whole galaxy." Morrison nodded. The galaxy changed once before, when they decided they did not need heroes anymore. Maybe it is time for it to change again. As Harper walked away, Morrison went into his room and sat at his desk. He opened a communication channel to Earth. It would take hours for his message to reach home. But he had to try. He began to type. To Earth Command. "Request permission to begin Project Night. The galaxy has forgotten how to be heroes. Time to remind them." Outside his window, Valtara continued to spin. Dead and empty. A reminder of what happened when no one was brave enough to stand in the way of evil. But maybe that was about to change. 3 weeks later, Morrison stood in the Pentagon's main briefing room. The walls were covered with screens showing star maps and battle reports. President Claire Anderson sat at the head of the long table. Around her were the most important military leaders on Earth. "Admiral Morrison," the president said, "your report about these Stellar Knights is interesting. But I need to understand something. You want us to play dress-up and pretend to be medieval knights? General Frank Murphy, the chairman of the joint. Chiefs shook his head. Madam President, this is exactly what I was afraid of. We spend billions on the most advanced military in human history, and now we want to go backwards? Morrison had expected this reaction. Sir, with respect, we are not going backwards. We are going forward with principles that work. Principles? General Murphy laughed. Admiral, war is about technology, tactics, and firepower, not fairy tales. Colonel Ben Rodriguez raised his hand. He was sitting near the back of the room. Morrison knew Rodriguez by reputation. The man had led the 7th Special Operations Wing through some of the toughest missions in human space. His soldiers would follow him anywhere. Permission to speak. Sir? Rodriguez asked. Doc President Anderson nodded. Go ahead, Colonel. Rodriguez stood up. He was not a tall man, but he had the kind of presence that made people listen. I have read Admiral Morrison's report. I have also studied the Old Knight. Codes, the Code of Chivalry, the Bushido Code, the principles that made warriors into something more than just killers. And? General Murphy asked. And I think the Admiral is right, Rodriguez said. My men are good soldiers, the best in the galaxy, but they fight for pay, for orders, for their country. What if they fought for something bigger? What if they fought because it was right? Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Lewis, the head of military training, looked confused. Colonel, our soldiers already fight for what is right. They fight for freedom, for democracy, for human values. Do they? Rodriguez asked. Or do they fight because they are told to? When was the last time a soldier disobeyed orders because those orders were wrong? When was the last time someone chose to protect civilians over completing a mission? The room became quiet. Morrison could see that Rodriguez was making people think. Colonel, the president said, what exactly are you suggesting? Rodriguez looked at Morrison, then back at the president. I am suggesting we try something new. Let me take my best people and train them in the old ways. Not just the fighting skills, but the mindset, the willingness to sacrifice for others, the refusal to abandon the innocent. General Murphy was getting angry. Colonel, you are talking about changing the basic nature of military service. Soldiers follow orders. They complete missions. They do not make moral judgments in the field. Maybe that is the problem, Morrison said quietly. Everyone looked at him. The aliens expect us to act like soldiers. Follow orders. Complete missions. Minimize casualties. What if we acted like something else? Dr. Amanda Stone, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. She was the head of the new Xenarchaeology department. I have been studying the records that Elder Zix-9 provided. The original Stellar Knights were not just warriors. They were symbols. People believed in them. That belief gave them power. What kind of power? President Anderson asked. The power to inspire others, Dr. Stone said. When a Stellar Knight entered a battle, civilians would fight alongside them. Soldiers would perform impossible feats. Even enemies would sometimes switch sides. General Murphy snorted. Doctor, this sounds like propaganda, not military strategy. Is it? Dr. Stone asked. She touched a control on her tablet. A hologram appeared above the table. It showed an ancient battle scene. This is from the Battle of Nexus 7, 3,000 years ago. A single Stellar Knight named Valorian held off an entire pirate fleet while civilian ships escaped. The hologram showed a figure in gleaming armor standing on the bridge of a small ship. Enemy vessels surrounded him, but he did not run. Instead, he flew directly at the largest enemy ship. Valorian died in that battle, Dr. Stone continued. But his sacrifice inspired the civilian fleet. They turned around and joined the fight. The pirates were defeated by people who had never held a weapon before. Interesting story, General Murphy said. But stories do not win wars. Colonel Rodriguez stepped forward. General, with respect, what if they do? What if the reason we cannot beat the Void Reapers is that we are fighting the wrong kind of war? President Anderson held up her hand for silence. She looked around the room, then back at Morrison. Admiral, I need to understand something. Are you talking about changing our military doctrine, or are you talking about something bigger? Morrison had been waiting for this question. He had thought about it during the long trip back from Nexus Prime. Madam President, I am talking about changing what it means to be human in this galaxy. The room was completely silent now. The other species see us as young, primitive, violent, Morrison continued. They think our ideas about honor and duty are old-fashioned. Maybe they are right. But maybe being old-fashioned is exactly what the galaxy needs right now. Lieutenant Maya Phillips, who had been taking notes near the door, raised her hand. She was one of Rodriguez's people, a combat engineer who specialized in power armor. Systems. Sir, if we are really going to do this, we need to think about equipment. The old Stellar Knights had special armor. It was not just protection. It was a symbol. Symbols do not stop bullets, General Murphy said. No, sir, Phillips replied, but they stop fear. And fear is what the Void Reapers use as their main weapon. Rodriguez nodded. Lieutenant Phillips is right. I have read the reports from the Kiev. Reaper attacks. They do not just destroy things. They make people afraid to fight back. They break the will to resist. And you think Knights can fix that? General Murphy asked. I think people who are willing to die for others can fix that, Rodriguez said. People who put justice before safety. People who protect the weak even when it costs them everything. Sergeant Ryan Clark, another of Rodriguez's men, spoke from the back of the room. Sir, my grandfather told me stories about the old days. About soldiers who jumped on grenades to save their friends. About pilots who crashed their planes into enemy ships. Those were not orders. Those were choices. Choices that got them killed, General Murphy pointed out. Choices that saved others, Clark replied. Choices that meant something. President Anderson was quiet for a long minute. She looked at the hologram that still showed the ancient battle. The figure of Valorian, standing alone against impossible odds. Colonel Rodriguez, she said finally, how many men would you need for this experiment? Rodriguez thought for a moment. 50, Madam President. My best people. The ones who already understand what it means to put others first. And how long would you need to train them? 6 months to learn the basics, Rodriguez said. A lifetime to perfect it. General Murphy shook his head. Madam President, this is a waste of resources. We should be building more ships, training more soldiers, developing better weapons. We have been doing that for years, Morrison reminded him, and we still cannot stop the Void Reapers. President Anderson stood up. Everyone else stood as well. Admiral Morrison, you will work with Colonel Rodriguez to develop this program. Dr. Stone, you will provide all the historical data we have about the Stellar Knights. I want a full report in 30 days. Madam President, General Murphy said, I must object to this course of action. Objection noted, General, the President replied. But sometimes the old ways are the best ways. And sometimes you have to take a leap of faith. As the meeting ended, Rodriguez walked over to Morrison. Admiral, I hope you know what you are getting us into. Morrison looked out the window at the earth below. Somewhere up there, in the darkness between the stars, the Void Reapers were destroying more colonies. More families were dying because no one could protect them. Colonel, Morrison said, I know exactly what I am getting us into. The question is whether we are brave enough to see it through. Rodriguez smiled. For the first time in weeks, it was a real smile. Sir, my men and I have been waiting our whole lives for a chance to be heroes. I think we are ready. Outside, the stars waited. The galaxy was vast and dark and full of dangers. But somewhere in that darkness, the idea of knights was being born again. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. 6 months later, Colonel Rodriguez stood in the armor bay at Camp Liberty, watching his soldiers prepare for their first real mission. The training had been harder than anything they had ever done before. Not just the physical part, but the mental part. Learning to think like knights instead of soldiers. Lieutenant Maya Phillips finished checking her power armor systems. The armor looked different now. Still military, but with something extra. A blue cape hung from the shoulders. A silver cross was painted on the chest. Small things, but they meant everything. "Phillips," Rodriguez called out, "how are the systems?" "All green, sir," she replied. "The new armor works perfectly. Stronger than our old gear, but lighter too. And the power cells will last twice as long." Sergeant Ryan Clark walked over, carrying his modified rifle. He had painted words on the side in Old English letters. "For the innocent." It looked strange on a modern weapon, but somehow it felt right. "Sir," Clark said, "the men are ready. We all took the oath yesterday. We know what we are fighting for now." Rodriguez nodded. He remembered the oath ceremony. 50 soldiers standing in a circle, promising to protect those who could not protect themselves. Promising to put justice before safety. Promising to be shields for the defenseless and swords against the darkness. The door to the armor bay opened. Admiral Morrison walked in, followed by Dr. Stone and President Anderson. The president had come to see them off personally. "Colonel," the president said, "are your knights ready?" Rodriguez almost smiled at hearing his soldiers called knights. It had taken months to get used to the idea. "Yes, Madam President." "We are." "Ready." Dr. Stone held up a data pad. "The Void Reapers have attacked the civilian convoy near New Denver Colony. 300 refugee ships, mostly families fleeing from the Outer Rim. The convoy has no military escort." "Why not?" Morrison asked. "The Galactic Council decided it was too dangerous," Dr. Stone replied. "They said the risk to military vessels was too high." President Anderson's face became hard. "So they left the civilians to die. That is the logical choice," Dr. Stone said. "Save the valuable military assets, accept the loss of the refugees." Clark made an angry sound. "That is not logical. That is cowardice." "Sergeant," Rodriguez warned, but his heart was not in it. He felt the same way. Morrison looked at the knights. "This is what we trained for. This is why the galaxy needs to remember what knights really are." The mission briefing was simple. The Void Reapers had surrounded the refugee convoy with 12 ships, fast attack vessels with heavy weapons. The refugees had nowhere to run and no way to fight back. The logical military response would be to send a large fleet. But by the time the fleet arrived, the refugees would be dead. The smart thing to do was to not risk any military assets for people who were already doomed. But knights did not do the smart thing. Knights did the right thing. Lieutenant Phillips studied the tactical display. "Sir, 12 enemy ships against our single transport. The odds are not good." "Since when do knights worry about odds?" Rodriguez asked. Phillips smiled. It was not a happy smile, but it was determined. "You are right, sir. When do we leave?" The transport ship Defender was not built for combat. It was designed to carry troops from place to place. But Dr. Stone's people had made some changes. Better shields, faster engines, and something special in the cargo bay dot as they flew through hyperspace toward New Denver. Rodriguez gathered his. Knights in the main compartment. Through the windows, he could see the stars streaming past like silver lines. "Listen up," he said. "In 1 hour, We are going to drop out of hyperspace right in the middle of a battle. The enemy will outnumber. You is 12-1. They will have bigger guns and better ships. The knights listened quietly. No one looked afraid. The refugees we are going to save do not know us, Rodriguez continued. They are not human. Most of them are from species that think we are primitive. They probably think our ideas about honor and duty are stupid. Sergeant Clark raised his hand. Sir, does that matter? Rodriguez smiled. No, Sergeant. It does not matter at all. We are not doing this because they deserve it. We are doing this because it is right. Lieutenant Phillips checked her weapons one more time. Sir, what if we cannot save them all? Then we save as many as we can, Rodriguez replied. And we make. Sure, the Void Reapers remember this day. The hyperspace alarm sounded. They were almost at New Denver. Rodriguez activated the communication system. All knights, this is Colonel Rodriguez. Today, we are going to show the galaxy what it means to be heroes. We are going to fight not because we were ordered to, but because we chose to. We are going to protect the innocent, not because it is smart, but because it is right. The transport dropped out of hyperspace. Immediately, the tactical screens lit up with red dots. 12 Void Reaper ships surrounded a cluster of civilian vessels. Some of the refugee ships were already burning. Phillips, Rodriguez called out, launch the pods. The special cargo bay opened. 50 individual assault pods shot out of the transport. Each pod contained one knight in powered armor. The pods were not designed to win space battles. They were designed to get knights where they needed to be. The Void Reapers were confused. What kind of military force launched individual soldiers into space during a ship battle? It made no tactical sense. But knights did not fight for tactical sense. They fought for people. Rodriguez's pod slammed into the hull of the nearest Reaper ship. His armor's cutting tools burned through the metal. In seconds, he was inside the enemy vessel. The Void Reapers inside the ship were not ready for this kind of attack. They were used to fighting other ships, not armored warriors who appeared in their corridors. Rodriguez moved through the ship like a force of nature. His weapons were not the most advanced in the galaxy, but he used them with a purpose that the Reapers could not understand. Every shot was aimed to disable, not destroy. Every move was calculated to protect the civilians outside, not just win the battle. Phillips landed on a different ship. She immediately began setting charges on the weapon systems, not to destroy the ship, but to stop it from firing on the moon. Refugees. Clark's pod hit a third ship. He fought his way to the bridge and broadcast a message on all frequencies. This is Sergeant Ryan Clark of the Stellar Knights. You are attacking innocent people. Surrender now, or we will stop you. The Void Reapers had never heard anything like this before. In all their battles, no one had ever offered them a chance to surrender. Everyone just tried to kill them or run away. On the refugee ships, alien families pressed against the windows and watched in amazement. The humans were not fighting like soldiers. They were fighting like something else. Something better. A small human child on one of the refugee ships asked her mother, "What are those people doing?" Her mother, a tall alien with 4 arms, watched as Knight Phillips jumped from one enemy ship to another, always placing herself between the weapons and the civilian vessels. "I think," the mother said slowly, "they are being heroes." The battle lasted 30 minutes. When it was over, 8 of the 12 Void Reaper ships had surrendered. 3 had been disabled. 1 had escaped. Most importantly, all 300 refugee ships were safe. Rodriguez floated in space near his damaged pod, watching the rescue operations. His armor was dented and scorched, but he was alive. Around him, his knights were helping to repair the civilian ships and treat the wounded. Phillips's voice crackled over the radio. Sir, the refugees are asking who we are. They want to know why we saved them. Rodriguez looked at the stars around them. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was watching. Somewhere out there, other people needed heroes. Tell them we are knights. He said, tell them we are here to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Clark's voice joined the conversation. Sir, I am getting reports from across the galaxy. The news of what we did here is spreading fast. Some alien species are asking if they can join the Knights. Rodriguez felt something he had not felt in years. Hope. Phillips, Clark, all Knights, he said over the open channel. Today we proved something important. We proved that the galaxy still needs heroes. And we proved that anyone can be a hero if they choose to be. As the rescue ships arrived to take the refugees to safety, Rodriguez realized that everything had changed. They had not just saved 300 ships. They had saved an idea. The idea that some things were worth fighting for, no matter what the cost. 3 months after the new Denver rescue, the galaxy was changing in ways no one had expected. Admiral Morrison stood in his office on Nexus Prime, reading reports that seemed impossible. On Titan VII, the industrial world that had been corrupted for decades, a human knight administrator named Kelly Brooks had cleaned up the entire government in 6 weeks. She had refused to take bribes, fired corrupt officials, and used her own money to help poor families. The local aliens called her the Iron Lady and followed her like she was a saint. On the mining colonies of the Helix Nebula, alien workers had started their own night chapters. They painted symbols on their work gear and took oaths to protect each other. Production had increased by 40% because people actually cared about their jobs now. But the Void Reapers were adapting to Captain. Lisa Harper walked into Morrison's office carrying a datapad with bad news written all over her face. Sir, you need to see this. Morrison looked at the pad. It showed intelligence reports from across the galaxy. The Void Reapers had stopped attacking random targets. Now they were hunting Knights. They killed Knight Captain Sam Davis on Proxima. Stationed last week, Harper said. They tortured him for hours before they executed him. And they broadcast it across the local networks. Morrison felt sick. Davis had been one of Rodriguez's original Knights. A good man who had saved hundreds of lives in the past few months. There is more, Harper continued. They destroyed the night training facility on Kepler 9. Killed everyone inside, including the alien volunteers who wanted to join the Order. Morrison sat down heavily. He had known this would happen eventually. The Void Reapers were not just pirates anymore. They were fighting a war against the idea of heroism itself. Sir, Harper said quietly, there is something else. The Reapers have issued a challenge. She handed him another datapad. The message was short and brutal. To the so-called Knights of the Galaxy. Your leader will meet our leader in single combat at the ruins of the old Stellar Knight Temple on Valtara. If your champion wins, we will withdraw from civilized space. If our champion wins, you will disband your order forever. You have 7 days to accept. Morrison looked up at Harper. Who signed this? Someone called the Shadow Lord, Harper replied. Intelligence thinks he might be the leader of the entire Void Reaper organization. Morrison thought about the challenge. It was obviously a trap. No sane military commander would risk everything on a single fight. But Knights were not supposed to be sane. They were supposed to do what was right, not what was smart. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Come in, Morrison called. Captain Danny Foster walked into the office. He was the youngest Knight commander in the human forces, only 25 years old. But he had already led more successful missions than officers twice his age. Sir, Foster. Syed, I heard about the challenge. Morrison nodded. Foster, sit down. We need to talk about this. Foster sat, but his back stayed straight. He had the kind of posture that made people want to follow him. "Sir, I want to accept the challenge." "Absolutely not," Morrison said immediately. "Foster, you are one of our best commanders. We cannot risk losing you in some gladiator match." "With respect, sir," Foster replied, "this is not about risk. This is about what it means to be a knight." Harper leaned forward. "Captain Foster, the challenge is obviously a trap. This Shadow Lord probably has technology we have never seen before. Enhanced strength, advanced weapons, maybe even alien modifications." Foster nodded. "Probably, but that does not matter." "Of course it matters," Morrison said. "Foster, I cannot let you throw your life away." Foster was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, and his voice was calm and sure. "Sir, do you remember the oath we took when we became knights?" Morrison did remember. Every word was burned into his memory. "I shall be a shield for the defenseless, a sword against the darkness, and a light in the void." "That is right," Foster said. "A light in the void." "Sir, what do you think will happen if we refuse this challenge? What will happen if we let the Reapers say that the knights are cowards?" Harper understood first. "The movement will collapse. All those alien species who joined the knights, all those people who started believing in heroes again. They will lose faith." "Exactly," Foster said. "Sir, this is not about winning or losing. This is about showing the galaxy that some things are worth dying for." Morrison stood up and walked to the window. Below, the dead world of Valtara turned. Slowly in space, the planet where the old stellar knights had made their last stand 3,000 years ago. "Foster," Morrison said without turning around, "you have a bright future ahead of you. You could command fleets, lead armies, maybe. Even become an admiral someday. Are you really willing to give all that up for a symbolic gesture?" Foster's reflection appeared in the window next to Morrison's. The young man's face was serious, but not sad. "Sir, what good is a future if we lose our souls getting there?" Morrison turned around. "What do you mean?" "I mean that being a knight is not about living forever," Foster said. "It is about standing up for what is right, even when it costs everything. Especially when it costs everything." Harper was reading more reports on her datapad. "Captain, the intelligence on this Shadow Lord is very limited. We know he has been leading the Reapers for at least 5 years. We know he uses some kind of advanced combat technology. But we do not know who he really is, or where he came from." Foster shrugged. "Does it matter? Whether he is alien or human, whether he has super strength or magic weapons, he is still just one person. And one person can be beaten if you have the right motivation." "What motivation?" Morrison asked. Foster smiled, and for a moment he looked like the young man he really was. "The motivation to protect innocent people. The motivation to show bullies that they cannot win through fear. The motivation to prove that heroes are real." Morrison thought about all the reports Harper had shown him. Night chapters forming on dozens of worlds. Corrupt governments cleaning themselves up. Pirates and criminals running away instead of fighting because they were afraid of facing real heroes. But he also thought about Knight Captain Davis, tortured and killed for trying to help people. He thought about the training facility on Kepler 9, destroyed because someone dared to teach aliens how to be knights. "Foster," Morrison said finally, "if I let you do this, you will probably die." "Yes, sir," Foster replied. "But if I do not do this, the idea of knights might die instead. And that would be worse." Lieutenant Sophie Green knocked on the door and entered without waiting for permission. She was Foster's second in command and one of the toughest people Morrison had ever met. "Sir," she said to Foster, "I heard about your plan. You cannot do this alone." "Green," Foster said, "this is single combat. I have to go alone." Green shook her head. "Sir, you can go alone to the fight. But you do not have to go alone to the planet. Let me and a squad come with you. We can watch your back until the actual combat starts." Morrison looked at the 3 young officers in his room. Foster, who was willing to die for an idea. Green, who was willing to risk everything to support her friend. Harper, who was trying to find a way to make the impossible work. "All right," Morrison said. "Foster, you can accept the challenge. But Green is right. You are not going alone." Foster stood up and saluted. "Thank you, sir. When do we leave?" Morrison looked out at Valtara again. In 3 days, either the Knights would prove that heroes could still win, or they would prove that the galaxy had been right to abandon the idea of individual heroism. "We leave tomorrow," Morrison said. "And Foster?" "Yes, sir?" "Make sure you win." Foster's smile was confident and calm. "Sir, I do not plan to win. I plan to do what is right. If I do that, and we have already won, no matter what happens to me." As the 3 officers left his office, Morrison realized that Foster was right. The fight on Valtara would not really be about winning or losing. It would be about showing the galaxy that some people were still willing to stand up to evil, even when they could not win, even when it cost them everything. Captain Danny Foster stood on the ancient stones of the old Stellar Knight Temple on Valtara. The wind blew dust across the broken pillars and crumbling walls. 3,000 years ago, this place had been beautiful. Now it was a graveyard for heroes. Around the temple, thousands of ships floated in space. Representatives from every major species in the galaxy had come to watch. Some hoped to see the Knights win. Others wanted to see them fail. All of them knew that what happened here would change everything. Lieutenant Sophie Green checked her rifle one more time. She and her squad were positioned around the temple ruins, watching for any sign of treachery. The challenge was supposed to be single combat, but the Void Reapers were not known for playing fair. "Foster," Green called over the radio. "You sure about this?" Foster touched the silver cross painted on his armor. "Green, I have never been more sure of anything in my life." Admiral Morrison's voice crackled through the communication system from his ship above. "Foster, you still have time to change your mind. We could send the entire fleet instead." "No, sir," Foster replied. "This is not about military might. This is about proving that one person can make a difference when they fight for the right reasons." A shadow fell across the temple. Foster looked up to see a Void Reaper ship landing near the ancient altar. The ship was black as space itself, covered in weapons and armor plating. It looked like death-given form. The ship's door opened. A figure stepped out that made Foster's blood run cold. The Shadow Lord was tall, maybe 7 feet. His armor was more advanced than anything Foster had ever seen. It seemed to absorb light, making him look like a walking piece of the void between stars. But the most shocking thing was his voice when he spoke. "Hello, Foster," the Shadow Lord said. "Do you recognize me?" Foster did recognize the voice. It was human. "Who are you?" Foster asked. The Shadow Lord reached up and removed his helmet. The face underneath was scarred and bitter, but it was definitely human. More than that, it was familiar. "My name is Marcus Webb," the figure said. "I was a Stellar Knight once. The last one, before your order began." Foster felt the world spin around. "Him? That is impossible. The Stellar Knights died out 3,000 years ago." Webb laughed, but it was not a pleasant sound. "The order died, but some of us survived. Hidden, forgotten, watching as the galaxy moved on without us. Watching as our ideals became jokes and our sacrifices became meaningless." Green's voice was tight with shock over the radio. "Foster, get out of there. This is a trap." But Foster did not move. He was beginning to understand something important. You are not just any knight, were you, Webb? You were one of the last. You saw the Order fall apart. Webb nodded. I was at the Battle of Nexus Prime, when the Council declared that individual heroism was obsolete. I watched as my brothers and sisters hung up their swords and went home. I watched as the galaxy decided it did not need heroes anymore. So you became a villain instead, Foster said. Webb's eyes flashed with anger. I became realistic. For 3,000 years, I have watched this galaxy stumble from one crisis to another. Wars, plagues, disasters. All because people stopped believing in sacrifice and duty and honor. Then why are you fighting us? Foster asked. We believe. In those things? Webb drew his weapon. It was a sword, but not like any sword Foster had ever seen. It hummed with energy and seemed to cut the air itself. Because you are pretenders, Webb shouted. You think you can just put on armor and call yourselves knights? You think it is that easy? I have spent 3,000 years perfecting the art of war. I have technology you cannot imagine. I have powers beyond your understanding. Foster drew his own sword. It was simple steel, enhanced with modern materials, but based on ancient designs. Next to Webb's energy blade, it looked like a child's toy. You are right, Foster said. I am not as strong as you. I do not have your technology or your experience. I am just a man who decided to try to help people. Webb charged forward with inhuman speed. His enhanced armor made him faster and stronger than any normal person could ever be. His sword cut through the air with deadly precision. Foster barely managed to block the first strike. The impact sent him sliding backward across the ancient stones. Webb was on him again instantly, his blade flashing in deadly arcs. This is what happens when children play at being heroes. Webb shouted as he attacked. You die. Foster rolled away from another strike that would have cut him in half. He was losing badly. Webb was right. The man had 3,000 years of experience and technology that made him superhuman. But as Foster fought for his life, he realized something that Webb had forgotten. Being a knight was not about being the strongest or the smartest or the best equipped. It was about being willing to stand up for others, even when you could not win. Foster stopped trying to match Webb's speed and strength. Instead, he started fighting like a knight. When Webb aimed a strike that would have killed Foster but might hurt civilian observers, Foster threw himself in the way, taking a painful hit to protect others. When Webb tried to use a weapon that would have destroyed part of the ancient temple, Foster tackled him, even though it left Foster open to attack. When Webb began using tactics that endangered Green and her squad, Foster drew fire to himself, ignoring his own safety. Webb became more and more frustrated. Why do you keep making stupid choices? Why do you not fight to win? Foster blocked another strike, his simple sword somehow finding the right angle to deflect Webb's advanced blade. Because winning is not the point. Then what is the point? Webb demanded. Foster smiled, even as blood ran down his face from a dozen cuts. The point is showing people that some things are worth dying for. All across the galaxy, people were watching the fight. On ships floating around Valtara, alien families pressed against windows to see the human knight fighting against impossible odds. On distant worlds, beings who had never heard of knights before watched as Foster chose to protect others instead of protecting himself. Webb's attacks became wilder and more desperate. He had expected to crush Foster quickly and prove that the new knights were weak. Instead, he was watching Foster do something that Webb himself had forgotten how to do. Foster was inspiring people. On one of the watching ships, a young alien child asked her mother, "Why does the small human keep fighting? He cannot win." Her mother, who had lived for 200 years and seen the rise and fall of governments and empires. Watched Foster stand up again after being knocked down for the 10th time. Because, the mother said slowly, sometimes the point is not to win. Sometimes the point is to show others that they can be better than they are. Webb landed what should have been a killing blow. His energy sword pierced Foster's armor and went deep into his chest. Foster fell to his knees, blood spreading across the ancient stones. "It is over," Webb said, breathing hard. "You lose." Foster looked up at him. His face was pale, but his eyes were still clear and determined. "No," he said quietly. "Look around." Webb looked. In the sky above them, the ships of the watching galaxy were moving. Not away from the battle, but closer. Ship after ship, from dozens of different species, were taking positions around the Void Reaper fleet. "What is this?" Webb demanded. Foster's voice was getting weaker, but he kept talking. "This is what happens when people remember what heroes look like. They remember that they can be heroes, too." On the communication channels, voices from across the galaxy were speaking. "This is Captain Zeal of the Crystalline Hegemony. We stand with the Knights. This is Admiral Krex of the Thermal Union. We will not let the Reapers leave this system. This is the Elder Council of the Ethereal Collective. We choose to fight." Webb looked around in shock. His own Reaper fleet was surrounded by ships from species that had been enemies for centuries. But they were not fighting each other anymore. They were fighting for the same thing Foster had fought for. Webb knelt beside Foster. "How?" he whispered. "How did you do this?" Foster's voice was barely audible now. "I did not do anything. I just reminded them who they could be." Foster died with a smile on his face, looking up at the ships that had come to honor his sacrifice. Webb sat beside the body for a long time. Around him, the Void Reaper fleet was surrendering without a fight. Many of the Reapers were asking to join the Knights instead of going to prison. Finally, Webb stood up. He looked at his energy sword, then threw it away. He knelt beside Foster's simple steel blade and picked it up. Lieutenant Green and her squad approached carefully. "Sir?" Green asked. Webb looked at her with eyes that were no longer angry. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "I thought being a knight was about being strong enough to protect people. But it is really about being brave enough to inspire them." 6 months later, Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the new flagship Knight's Honor, watching the dedication ceremony for the Knight Academy on New Camelot. The planet had been humanity's gift to the galaxy, a place where anyone, from any species, could learn to be a knight. Below on the planet's surface, thousands of beings from across the galaxy were taking the Knight's Oath together. Humans, aliens, even former Void Reapers who had chosen a different path. Marcus Webb, now wearing simple knight's armor instead of his dark technology, was one of the instructors. He taught the hardest classes, the ones about sacrifice and honor and the courage to do what was right even when it hurt.